Okay, hello everybody. My name's Matt Black. I'm a partnerships director at Shift. We're a kind of a design and research charity, and we've been running beyond a 6-month program of free design and digital training to help financial well-being organizations adapt their services in light of the crisis that we're living through at the moment. Um, Before we get started, and before we get into this panel, it would be great if the attendees, if you could just pop your name and organisation in the chat. We'd really love to know who we're talking to, just so just so you can introduce yourselves. That would be grand if you could do that. Thanks, Emily. We'll be kind of running through this and kind of broadcasting to you. I'll be asking the panelists some questions, and then we'd love to, if you can like comment along if things resonate. That really helps us understand we're on the right track. And if any questions come in as we go along, please stick those in the chat as well. That would be super helpful. What Well, it's been a big year, 2020, shaped by the pandemic. It's had a massively disproportionate impact on the communities we serve, those kind of particularly as normal in kind of low income contexts. We've also had the impact of the Black Lives Matters movement, and the death of George Floyd has kind of thrown a big curveball of who we are as an organizations and who we are across these different sectors. I guess what this panel is about is that organizations need to rethink and reassess in order to respond at speed to these various crises. We're 8 months into this now, and maybe we've had our initial responses. That was kind of back in March, April. But how are social sectors organizations thinking about how we move past firefighting and quick fixes and getting towards longer term responses for 2021 and beyond? To discuss this, I'm really pleased that we have 3 inspirational leaders working across housing, debt, money advice, and the affordable credit sector to share how their organizations have responded and what comes next. So yeah, before we get into it, I'm really grateful for Joe, Muna, and Izzy to join us. Joe from Turn to Us, Muna from Fair Money Advice, based in London, and Izzy from One Manchester, a kind of 12,000 property resident housing association based up in central Manchester. Really delighted you're here, really appreciative particularly of kind of what a busy time every organization's having. So thank you 3 for sparing the time, and thank you to all the attendees for coming along as well, because every minute kind of counts at the moment. So to explore these questions, I'm just going to jump into it. So what I'd like to hear, and what I'll ask all panelists, is to hear about how the past year has impacted your organization and the people you're working with. Where are you seeing the greatest opportunity, and where are you seeing the kind of the greatest need? And I think I might go to Muna to kick things off.
Make sure I'm off mute, otherwise it's not a great start. Hello everybody, as Matt says, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I guess the key thing for us is all of us have had to adapt to a lot of changes over the last 8 to 9 months, not only in our kind of personal lives, but also our kind of work life as well. So Fair Money Advice, just to give you a bit of an introduction, is a specialist debt advice charity. We focus on working with low-income communities in and around London who are facing crisis debt, but also we work with them around their financial well-being and increasing resilience. So prior to the pandemic, it feels like a long time ago, we used to deliver services face-to-face, one-to-one, and very bespoke, and in community locations. So we would deliver them from our offices. We're part of an organization called Fair Finance, which is a CDFI, and it has branches across East and Southeast London. So we would deliver sessions from those locations, but also our partner locations. So out of community organizations, housing association partners. So we were very much in the community working with our client groups. and being able to kind of deal with the challenges in situ. Due to COVID, we very quickly had to obviously safeguard our advisors and our staff, but also our client group. So we pivoted very quickly to telephone and digital services, literally overnight, and that takes some doing. And we're grateful to the kind of infrastructure that we had at Fair Finance to be able to do that. I think one of the areas that we very quickly understood was a big challenge for our client groups was actually how they engage with those services, having been very used to face-to-face community-based services. So a big part of what we were originally doing was working out how we could kind of replicate some of the things that we had done in the past. So the building up of trust for new clients, safeguarding the anxieties of people who have very complex lives, but also how do we do the practical stuff like get access to documents, verify them. So we've had to very quickly ourselves learn about technology. So it's been a learning curve with ourselves and our client groups at the same time. It's been very much trial and error. So very quickly being able to discard something if it doesn't work and then move on to the next thing. And I guess the key thing for us in terms of that whole transition process was actually learning that our clients are very resilient and they always have been. And it's about bringing that resilience together and using that collective effort to be able to work through solutions. So one of the things that we've learned is because we were such a partnership-based organization, that really helped us around intelligence, what was happening locally and what were the areas that we needed to respond to, but also what additional support that we could draw in. So yeah, I think the key thing for us is the fact that we were small, the fact that we were nimble, allowed us to be able to make the changes that we needed to for our clients.
Thanks, Muna. That I know that'll resonate with a lot of people on the call. And I wonder, like, thinking about Manchester, Izzy, like, is maybe having some similar challenges, but in a kind of different city and a different type of organization. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, so the last year has impacted on us as a housing association, as other people on the call will no doubt have experienced, that we had to change our priorities very quickly overnight. As a big housing association or a medium-sized housing association, we have a corporate plan, we have a board that have agreed that, signed that off. We had just gone live with that, and then overnight we had to completely transform what our priorities were, where we were placing the resources in the organisation, and also what the skills were of our colleagues that we had to prioritise and draw out. So we very quickly refocused the energy of, I would say, most of our staff. And that became all about supporting our customers with what we would say was probably the basic needs of Maslow's hierarchy. So ensuring that customers had access to food. In the first lockdown, food banks in Manchester, stopped or took very different delivery. So as well as Muna's experience and the experience of One Manchester, we were also responding to changes in how other partnership organisations were actually collaborating and how they were able to work. And we had to very quickly fill some gaps that were really, really important to our customers. And I think that was a big change for us, trying to step into other spaces that actually we don't normally occupy, but we just collaborate with. So that was a real thing that impacted on us this year, and something that we're still going through and that we're working with, and we'll come on to later about how we take that forward. And also it was realizing that many of our customers, again, like Muna's customers and clients, actually they needed guidance. They needed to be able to self-serve. They weren't necessarily the customers that we're used to serving. There was a lot of different types of customers that we were experiencing, and we had to change how we utilized our services to deliver that. So that for us, we've basically completely changed a lot of the way that we work with our communities and service our customers.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that a bit more later, both that last point and also whether when you step into these new new areas that you never expected, whether that's something that is now the role for housing associations moving forward, or whether it's going to be something you'll scale back when it's appropriate. Joe, would you tell us a bit about Turn to Us and your perspective on this? Because I think it might be slightly different again as a kind of a larger advice organisations. How have the challenges been different? Have they been the same? Tell us from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So Turn to Us is a national charity. We work across the UK, and we don't have the same local focus currently as maybe the other organisations do on the call. So it is a maybe different context. I think interestingly for us, we were just about to launch our new strategy at the beginning of the year when COVID hit, and we articulated our purpose as part of that strategy, and that's so that everyone has the opportunity to build financial sustainability and thrive. Turn to Us offers the information and support people need in the face of life-changing events, and collaborates to tackle the causes and symptoms of poverty. And so we were in the position of looking at that purpose statement and our wider strategy and thinking, well, this is just about the most cataclysmic, life-changing event that anyone could kind of imagine, or beyond what people could imagine. And what ability is there for people to have financial sustainability and thrive in this context? It's going to be really, really challenging for people. But I think we were quite pleased, I suppose, of one thing of that when we went through that strategy, everything was still relevant. So we were focusing on the areas that were the areas people needed. And that really was borne out in the huge increase in demand for our services. So we focus on kind of information and tools for people through our website, so our benefits calculator. And we also have a grant search where you can search for any number of grants available from organisations to individuals around the UK. And we also give our own grants as well. And so in that March, April time, we saw use of our benefits calculator go up 200%. As people were looking at things like universal credit for the first time, had never considered that was a route that they would have to go down, and they were doing a benefits calculation and going on to claim benefits. And I think to play a role in that, where so many people were kind of casting around for what to do next, feeling quite lost in a system that they were really unfamiliar with, I think it was really great to be there for people at that point. And we've really through this year realized that there is so much potential in the data that we gather through the benefits calculator, through the grant search, and through our website to get more insights that will then allow us to help more people. Because we are delivering services at scale, that's something that's available to us, but also looking for other organizations who are also, are also developing some insights, or maybe doing qualitative research where we can bring our work together. So we actually have been doing a lot of insight sharing with other organizations, looking at what they are learning, looking at what we are learning to improve our services, improve our work. And that's been really important to us this year. And then I think, bringing it up to date, where it's a constantly changing picture. I think we've just launched some new research called Weathering the Storm, which is really looking at where we are now, or where we are as of September versus where we were in March. And what we're seeing is actually 11 million people in the UK are running out of money either every week or every month, depending on when their receiving pay or benefits, and that's up 4.2 million on what it was in March, which is a really, really significant increase. So I think our responses now are not crisis responses, crisis grants. They're about designing programs that will support people to longer term, bringing together that grant funding with the information support and working with partners on the ground, because as much as it's great to have that UK-wide digital information support, we do need to be working with those local partners as well.
Thanks for that, Jo. Yeah, that's a pretty staggering and sobering statistic. I just can, for me anyway, at Shift, we're immersed in this all of the time, but we're stuck in our bedrooms and like working away there, and you can forget like the significant impact this is having on people. But I guess what I'm hearing across all three of you is like, one upside is there is an increased appetite to work together in a sector, across a range of sectors where often can be hard to create partnerships. So yeah, thanks, Jo, and thanks for everyone. Just wanted to move things forward a little bit and ask about fair money advice and go back to you, Muna. I was wondering if you could tell us more about what the experience has been like as a small organisation. I mean, you've got a local presence in boroughs across London. What have been the main challenges you faced in responding and adapting? And I think you mentioned digital, that speed of transition before, but I'd love to hear a bit more about that and dig into any particular challenges that you've grappled with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned digital, and I'll come back to that at the end. But originally, a lot of our clients faced a serious sense of anxiety. Obviously, as Issy mentioned, people were focused on basic needs, so food, health, and actually getting that out to people was our first kind of concern. So we very quickly linked up with mutual aid groups to deliver food parcels and ensure that people had the things that they needed. Another key area of focus for us was, as Jo mentioned, people who had never engaged with the benefit system before. So even though we're a specialist debt advice agency and we had worked in the past with other organisations to deliver benefit advice, that advice wasn't available, or it wasn't available in the format that people could actually access it. So we were having to step in ourselves and deliver some of that. So we've kind of shifted some of our services to include a bit more money guidance and support around income maximization, much more than we ever have done in the past. And I think that will be something that, as more and more people find themselves out of work and having to kind of navigate new areas of support, will continue. I think one of the challenges for us as a smaller organization is that obviously we don't have that scale. But one of the things that we have been very fortunate in is that over the last 4 to 5 years, and Matt, you know this from working with us, a lot of our focus has been around partnership building and consortia building to kind of replicate that scale, but still maintain that local connection. Because a lot of our work with our client groups tells us that they value that connection and that ability to have local intelligence and local kind of representation. But at the same time, we know that to be able to influence change and to kind of change policies and really elevate their voices, we need to have scale to be able to do that. So we've been working with lots of similar organisations across London over the last 4 to 5 years to build that scale as a partnership. And that really came to the fore in this crisis. So we have been working with key stakeholders like MAPS to kind of feedback learning and intelligence of what's happening on the ground, and being able to do that quite quickly through our Debt Free London partnership. We've also been working with DCMS around really focused on the disproportionate impact on Black and ethnic minority communities and how that's playing on the ground, and some of the things that we are able to support around what a long-term recovery looks like for that group, considering that some of the longer-term economic impacts tend to disproportionately affect them as well. And so coming back to the kind of digital area, we have worked with our lending teams around helping design through some work that we've done with also Matt's team around really putting together a navigator. So for people who are new to this area of advice and who have never engaged with advice services before, how do they navigate that online and in ways that they are comfortable with? So being able to add on value to people who are seeking credit, for example, but actually their credit is not the right tool for them or the right product for them. So how do they then find the help that they need? But we've also done a lot of work in our debt advice service as well. So utilizing open banking where we can, really focusing on areas around utilizing tools such as WhatsApp for instant access to documents, WeTransfer. And one of the areas that we think will stay is definitely that utilization of digital advice for those new types of clients, but also necessity is the mother of invention. So a lot of clients that traditionally you would have thought would not engage with digital services have had to because of COVID, and have had to just to be able to access not only services, but also stay in touch with family. So you're really using that opportunity to continue that learning and that kind of forward thinking around how those services can continue to engage with that client group.
Yeah, really interesting, really important work you've been doing, and yeah, we've been pleased to help with some of that. And thanks for the plug. Izzy, not that I asked for it. Izzy, I wanted to ask you a question next, and I guess on a slightly different track. I think so. From my perspective, like the relationship between a housing association and their tenants can be a bit fraught in my experience, in that, you know, often there are brilliant individuals and brilliant teams working within housing associations trying to make a difference. But the experience from a tenant's perspective is often that whenever you do the user research with them, it's like all they want to hear about is the repairs, and the only communication they get is like an arrears letter whenever they go into arrears, and that kind of can make it a bit fraught. I wondered to what extent you've been able to build meaningful relationships with your tenants this year. How's that relationship changed, and how do you see that evolving in the future?
That's a great question, thank you. So I think 2020 is a landmark year for the relationship between customers and housing associations. Because of the pandemic, we have had to and want to reach out to all of our customers in a way that is probably unprecedented, and I know that word is overused. But also we've had the white paper drop recently around tenant voice. But one of the things that One Manchester did, and I know a number of other housing associations did, is we contacted all of our customers. Now, One Manchester has never done that before. We are used to serving a specific cohort of customers that might have enduring or complex needs, and, you know, supporting them with our specialist support services. We've never gone out and proactively contacted every single one of our customers before. And that was one of the things I was talking about, a refocus of the business. We used our own colleagues to do that, which I think really helped strengthen and build those relationships. As you are alluding to, some of those conversations, because we were just having an open conversation about, is everything okay? Is there anything you need help with that we can connect you to or help you with ourselves? And some of that threw up that some of our customers aren't happy about our internal services. They're not receiving the standard that they would expect. And actually, that was really useful to us because we didn't know that. So I think having the approach of actually it's useful to listen and hear what customers are telling us. We've actually implemented a very quick turnaround so we could act on that, and we used it as positive feedback. We didn't use it as being defensive. And also, because we were contacting such a large cohort of customers, it was easy not to say, oh, that's Mrs. Goggins and she's always kicking off, and, you know, all that kind of thing. It was really good because we had some key themes that came out, and we could set up some work groups that would actually design out those issues or iron out those issues. And also, we've now been able to categorize customers who previously we've never had down as in need of services or vulnerable or needing to be connected to other services, and we've actually been able to proactively do that work. A lot of customers have fed back to us how valuable they felt that, because one of the other things we found was a lot of isolation in our customers. So they might have been all right for food, they might have been all right for a lot of other things, but actually they weren't going to talk to anybody. They had no family nearby. So we also connected them to befriending services and made sure that our staff were also available to check in with people more regularly that needed that support. And that's something that's really helped inform and reshape some of our overall strategic approach. It's also reshaping our service offer and what we know now is important to customers. So for us, it is a real landmark year, and I wouldn't wish this pandemic on anyone, but actually for us, that has been an incredibly positive experience. We've had a lot of good feedback from customers that they've really appreciated us checking in, even if they don't need help. They've said, oh, but have you spoke to such a body, because we know they need help on the estate. So for us, it's actually completely reset our relationship. I think like any housing provider, we had good relationships, we had non-relationships, because some customers just don't want a relationship with the landlord. We just want us to turn up when we say we will, and that's it. And other customers who want us to be active and to know about our relationship in the community and what we're doing in the community. It's also helped us reshape our partnerships. So are we partnering with the right organisations in our communities? Picking up on a point of another panellist earlier about really strengthening our ties with BAME community leaders as well. We've done a lot of work there because they're really trusted in the community, and it's about using them as well and not just our own communication channels. So for us, that's been really positive and something that we're keen to carry on.
Absolutely. I think, again, yeah, like it's easy to be blasé about the role of housing associations, but actually I think you've seen the difference between being in a housing association resident and being in the private rented sector this year. And I do think though, the sector's acted as one to kind of do those calls really, and the ones who use it as an opportunity to better segment and provide better service to the customers could potentially be in a great position moving forward. Thinking about kind of different segments, and Joe, you were saying earlier, you've kind of seen new people using the Turn to Us website. From your position of getting a lot of data and a lot of understanding of needs, how is the experience for people interacting and benefit and using the benefit system for the first time? How has your audience changed, and how do you support different kind of segments?
So I think this year has really seen us understand this in a much deeper way than ever before. In terms of, I suppose, what surprised us, it has been new patterns of use of tools like the benefits calculator by people in what we would typically call more affluent areas. Some more recent research that we've done alongside Buttle UK, we've actually found that almost a quarter of people in the least deprived areas of the country who are searching for benefits are currently unable to afford food. So, I think we've had, views about different parts of the country, patterns of needs, and had those really, really challenged this year. On the other hand, it has underscored some things that we already knew and helped us to understand that in deeper and, I'd say, probably better ways. So we understand at the moment that younger people, particularly people in who are employed in the gig economy or who are employed in hospitality, are struggling more than people in older age ranges. They're running out of money more quickly. Obviously, they have less in savings. People with a disability as well is another group that we know we need to continue to support. And then, as already been mentioned, Black and minoritized ethnic people are another, we already know that we need to work with those communities and do more there. And single parents, I'd say, is another area, really struggling, seeing income falling massively, particularly, and I'll say specifically around the self-isolation payments that have been a big issue over the last 2 months, and single parents not able to claim any additional support, even if a child is home from school having to self-isolate and the parent has no choice but to take time off work. So, but single parents are often having a really tough time. So it's just a kind of a deepening and an underscoring of that, I suppose, rather than a new issue. So ongoing needs, in addition, new needs, and how do we take what we're learning and actually bring that into our program. And I think we're seeing that at the moment, where, as I said, we're looking at partners on the ground who are particularly able to work with us on different areas of need in different geographies with different specialisms, because I think we are really good at providing income maximization support and guidance to people at scale, and tying that in with money, putting money in people's pockets. Our COVID response grants of £500, that was enough for people to put food on the table for a couple of weeks and give people breathing space. But we need to work with partners to really bring in that targeted, tailored support. And it's interesting, because we can see that there are, even if we're providing a benefits calculation for people, and people are able to get that benefits calculation, go on to apply for a benefit, that doesn't necessarily mean that people will get that benefit, right? So that's another area of focus for us now, of actually making sure that we're joining the dots, and people who get that benefits calculation are then able to go on and successfully claim, be it universal credit or another benefit.
Thank you, Jo. That's really helpful. Really interesting to hear that. It'd be great to get some questions coming in from the attendees. So if you do have a question for Jo, Muna, or Izzy, do stick it in the chat, and I'll ask it. While you're percolating on what you want to kind of find out from these three, I do have a question that we can chat about now. And I think one of the things that's come up again and again through Beyond is this challenge of, how do you provide services to vulnerable groups who are actually digitally excluded? I mean, the opportunity to redo services online has actually been great, but not everyone can be reached. So I would love to hear from your organizations any particular challenges you've had there and how you've overcome them. Maybe I'll go. Izzy, do you want to have a crack at that first?
Sure. So I think it's multifaceted, and I don't think there's any one answer, sorry. But I think that it's actually quite a complex issue, and I don't think any individual organisation can solve it, because some of it is actually about infrastructure, some of it is about scale, some of it is about confidence and ability to use devices. So within that framework, knowing we don't know all the answers, we have proactively partnered with other people who are far more clever, with far more experience than us. There's quite a lot of work within our conurbation of Greater Manchester that's going on around the digital divide, and related to that is funding that we're tapping into alongside other housing providers. We also are partnering with our local authority to get digital devices out to some of our most excluded and vulnerable people who really need them, because not only do they need them to access finances, but also to do schoolwork etc. So we're supporting them. We are also collecting that evidence. So when we are calling customers, we are including that as one of our questions, instead of, you know, just food and connection. Do you actually need help with accessing things? Can you get online? So have you got the skills and have you got the kit? Because they're two different things. And we're using that to inform and map and lobby in terms of this is what's required, this is what's needed. I think sometimes because it's such a multifaceted issue, people spend a lot of time talking about it rather than becoming practical. And at One Manchester, we like to do both. We like to be quite practical, but then send it back up to strategic people to actually do something at scale that makes an impact. So I don't think it's an easy answer, but the other thing we've been doing is trying to be creative within the government guidelines of how we support people who can't get onto things. So we have caretakers, we have place coordinators, we will drop things through letterboxes that we will also post on our website. So we're fortunate in a housing association that we can do things like that, but we are trying to be quite pragmatic and practical about how we reach people and our expectations of what we're expecting people to do in the current environment.
Brilliant. Thanks, Izzy. Joe, what about you on this question? Because I guess the website is, you don't, do you know which groups you're not reaching, or how do you answer that question as a big national website?
So yeah, I think we have, as an organisation, we've been around for 120 years. I don't think many people know that. I have to say we changed names in that time. So the Turn to Us is definitely an early noughties kind of name, isn't it? But we were previously around before then. And we have really embraced digital technology, and we know that it works well for a lot of people, but the correlation between digital exclusion and financial hardship is really stark. And actually, you know, up to 1/5 of people don't have digital skills to do their day-to-day tasks online. So someone might have like Facebook on their phone, but that doesn't mean that they would be comfortable doing a benefits calculation or any number of the other tools that would be helpful for people to manage their money better or apply for various assistance. So it's a gap. I think right now I'm really interested in, firstly, we have a contact centre, so people can phone up, Turn to Us, and get support to go through our digital tools. It's likely to be the person answering the phone going through the tool on their behalf and then sending them some information, either over email if they're comfortable with that, or in the post. But you know, that's not a massively scalable intervention either. Another thing we're exploring is working with networks of volunteers on the ground and actually providing our tools out to people who volunteer or work for other organisations. And we have had success on that in the past. I think we're looking to expand that more with volunteers rather than just the paid staff as well. So that's potential. The other thing that's really interesting is looking at where we can actually marry up the kind of education digital skills piece with the financial inclusion piece. So having really interesting conversations with Good Things Foundation and another organisation called Clean Slate, and they've been using the Turn to Us tools to pilot a programme being funded by Joseph Rowntree and MasterCard, and you know, there's really interesting initial findings there where they're actually supporting people to develop those skills at the same time as giving them the bit of support around their finances. So I think that's one to kind of really keep an eye on, and we'll be looking at, you know, you've got, as Izzy said, you've got to try and address it from as many different areas as possible to try and solve the problem.
Thanks, Joe. We've got a couple of Zingen questions there from Matt Smith, so we'll open those up now. So question, will any of your organizations ever go back to the way you delivered your services pre-COVID? Or have you learned so much and developed your services to a point where you are actually more efficient now? So I think that is really, really interesting. And I would like to go to Muna there on that one to kick us off.
It's a very good question. And we've learned so much that I think there are definite elements that we will continue. And there are elements that we will also go back to, because we recognize that actually they're irreplaceable by technology. So some of the one-to-one coaching and the peer-to-peer support and that ability for people to have conversations and those social interactions, we will definitely keep. But also we've learned so much around how we as an advice agency can be much more efficient utilizing technology, how much our clients can learn from that process. So it was interesting to hear the multidimensional issues around digital literacy. And that's something that we're grappling with as well. So really recognizing actually there are tech needs, there are data needs, there are issues around literacy and capabilities. What are the things that we've learned through this process that will allow us to be able to take some of those things forward and start to work through some of the solutions that have kind of come out of the pandemic and some of the issues that the pandemic has kind of unveiled that are underlying around some of our communities. I think one of the areas that we will always take forward and think that is most valuable is around that partnership work. And we started it prior to the pandemic, but also the crisis has really shown actually, if you're able to have different elements coming in to solve a solution for a client, and if you're able to have that kind of process where you're learning from each other. So one of the things that I really, really valued throughout this whole process is the ability for us to have honest, open conversations around what our role is in our communities and what the organization's role is, but also how much we should be empowering our clients to do for themselves and how much they need to have the support to be able to do that, and how we can sometimes be a barrier in this sector to enabling that to happen. So some of the conversations that we've been having with the mutual aid group, some of the conversations that have come out through the Black Lives Matter and the kind of systemic inequalities. So there are so many things that we will take forward as part of that learning, but there are definite things that we recognize around the social interaction and the human interaction and the isolation that us being apart has caused. We will take back into, and obviously there are organizational things like, do we need to have so many offices? Do we need to have so many physical spaces? All of those things we're working through as an organization and as a kind of senior management team and as a board. But it's about what are the key elements that we have missed throughout how we deliver things and how we make sure that we keep those as well.
Thanks. Izzy, how does that, is similar challenges at a different scale? What's going to be different for you?
Well, we've had feedback from most of our customers, which has informed what our services may look like and actually what they value from our services. And it's not necessarily the ones we've always assumed that they value, which is excellent and really, really important for us. So there are some elements that we will take forward from pre-pandemic, but actually I would say we've gone through all that awful transition, and I think where we are now is actually where we're headed. So when we pivoted, when we changed how we're delivering our services, when we refocused, actually we will tweak and we will evolve them. But what we found is they serve us better. So not only are they more efficient, they're actually more effective. As a housing association, it is a small organisation with many functions. And what we found was we were serving functions, we weren't serving customers, and we were serving processes, which was bonkers. And actually, we've got rid of quite a lot of that. And we're about, how does this affect the customer? How does that reach our end goal? Let's just get on with that. So it's about having that agility and also regular reviewing. So they're the things that we'll take forward, because it would have took us probably a 4-year transformational organisational change thing to get to where the organisation got to within 3 to 4 months, which is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Out of interest, which of the services, where were you most surprised? Which services did people really love, and which people, where were you thought you were good, but you were actually less good?
It was more about what were their priorities. So what were their expectations of us to deliver for them as a housing provider? So although we deliver money advice support and we have information on our website, we were used to serving the same kind of customers within that, and actually we know we now need to massively expand that. And I think Joe's made some really good points about we've got customers that have never had to access that, and actually we need to recalibrate what that looks like for them. Also about how people access services. So again, it's not as obvious to customers who might have never needed us about where the front door is, and so we've done a lot of work around that. So there's some of the main things, and also around employment and skills. So people who need to rapidly retrain or get support to get back on the job ladder pretty quickly. As a housing provider, our employment and skills services have been focused on people who've not worked for a long time. So it's a bit of a switch of the model.
Yeah, on that last one, I mean, it's a different jobs market now, isn't it? Like a year ago, it was a jobs market where it was the long-term unemployed and in-work poverty was the problem. Now it's in-work poverty, long-term unemployed, and newly unemployed with a jobs shortage. I have a specific question for you here, Izzy, from Eleanor at Responsible Finance. So she was wondering, are there services that you haven't provided in the past that you're now looking to offer to tenants going forward, aside from those initial COVID response measures? And do you see access to affordable credit as something that you can support your tenants with if you don't do this already?
So the second one, we signpost people to affordable credit. We have to be careful about the license because we're not licensed to do that. So as part of our support and guidance, we will let people know that that's out there. But as an individual housing provider, we've chosen not to go down that route at the moment. To be fair, I think that those kind of things are under review because we're going to be looking early next year about what we need to focus and where the gaps are for customers. As a housing association, it can be really tempting to jump into loads of different spaces. And what we're really conscious of is there's loads of really good other services out there, and our role should be to strengthen them and connect to them. So in terms of other services, that's the answer as well. In terms of in Manchester, there's loads of really good services, and our role, we think, is to strengthen them, support them, and then connect our customers to them. We don't necessarily think it's for us to grow what we do as a housing provider. We see our role as an anchor and as a connector. So we wouldn't necessarily decide that we wanted to create that service. We might proactively partner with someone else who already does it well. And that's something that we are actually currently looking at as part of our strategic review about what gaps have we got in services that are offered to our customers, and how can we partner or commission other community and social enterprises and organisations who are already operating in those spaces. We don't want to duplicate where people are already good at it.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Izzy. I think we'll just ask one last round of questions and then move to wrap it up. What have I got? Yes. So my last question is, based on your learnings about what has worked and what hasn't worked over the past year, what advice would you give to your kind of peers? And I might we'll start with Joe this time.
So I think we have had a kind of maybe a tortoise in the hare moment in some of our work, where we really went ahead from March, April time and did a lot around data and insight very, very quickly. We did our COVID response grant fund, and we added lots of information, added stuff to benefits calculator. It was very rapid crisis response. probably informed by the fact that a couple of relative new joiners to Turn to Us were from the humanitarian sector, so that helped us do that. And I think although it was fantastic, and I think we've shared a lot today of the positives, we have now had to go back and lay some of the groundwork and some of the foundational elements and reflect and replan. And we're planning now for the next financial year and looking ahead. And yeah, it's not like things that we feel that we've got wrong necessarily, but we're doing things like looking at a data and insight strategy, doing some of that thinking, making some of that thinking time. And so I think that's, you know, it's a good reflection is when you've got to move at breakneck speed, yes, you're going to miss some of those details and you're just going to jump in and do a lot of stuff, and you have to. But when you can make time to take a step back and reflect and replan, you will see, as we are, you know, some of those elements that we maybe miss, those opportunities to do, you know, the best quality work that we're now putting in place. And I think the learnings for this year, from this year, are phenomenal for looking ahead, you know, to potentially more difficult times, context of climate emergency, context of green industrial revolution plans, and, you know, just transitions to new forms of employment. We're not looking ahead to an easy, you know, decade ahead. So what can we actually learn from the ways that we've responded here to stand us in good stead for the future?
Thanks so much for that, Jo. Yeah, it is hard to plan at the moment. Muna, what about you? What would you say to organisations of your scale about what you've learned and what you do differently or do next?
I would say definitely listen to your clients and your customers. They clarify your priorities, but also they tell you about what their long-term plans and ambitions are, which gives you insights around actually where you should be thinking ahead. I think to Jo's point around there's lots coming around the corner. So originally we've had to pivot quite quickly. And in that time that you are making very quick decisions and you are going to miss details, but actually this is going to be a long-term recovery. Then we have to factor in things like Brexit and all of the things that will come from that as well. So we're in the process of thinking about our long-term strategy, but also thinking about where our clients need to be in the next 3 to 5 years and what are the services that we need to be able to deliver and how we deliver them. So I would say to partners, also listen and engage with your local networks. Ensure that you have that intelligence gathering from those smaller organizations that have access to or deeper connections with communities that you may not have, but also thinking about how you can, like Izzy says, not redesign the wheel, but also reinforce services that are already on the ground and support those to kind of expand and deepen the work that they're doing in the community. So yeah, those would be my key takeaways.
Yeah, and the same, that is, you know, listen to your customer. That's definitely what Manchester have done this year by the sounds of it. Izzy, is there anything else you'd add to your peers about what you've learned and what hasn't worked?
So Jo and Muna really put it really well for me, and so covered off some of my points. Thank you. The only thing that I would add that really helped us is go back to your core purpose of your organisation. Just get rid of all the noise, all the other stuff that comes out from left field and you have to do, and that person's important and they want a response, and you just go back to what is your organisation there to do as the key principles, and then you work out from there. And that actually has been really, really helpful for us, and it's very clarifying when there's a lot of noise and a lot of activity and a lot of we had to do it yesterday. The other thing that I would just like to say to other housing associations that are also on the call is actually remembering that there's a lot of customers out there, not just the ones that are used to dealing with in the services that you've already got, has really helped us. Because, you know, money advice, you tend to see a normal cohort. Employment and skills, you've got a certain cohort. There is a whole new cohort emerging that we've never actually really interacted with before. And I think Joe summed that up really well earlier. And actually, we're going to have to start designing and thinking about how we engage and support those customers, to support our communities, because this is going to be a long recovery, and the impact I don't think has been felt yet. And I think that's my worry, is that we need to plan and we need to encourage and foster resilience, both in our customers and in our organisations.
Thanks for that, Izzy. It's kind of not, there's tough times to come. I would caveat that with the amount of partnership working and the emphasis on that we're seeing, and the kind of the sort of focus, commitment and creativity that organizations like One Manchester, Turn to Us, Fair Money Advice and a ton of other organizations are doing to actually rethink things really quickly has been inspiring too. So big challenges ahead, but I think in your 3 organizations at least some great people working on solving that for people. So yeah, big thanks to all of you for the 3 of you for joining. I know with everything that we've talked about and all of our conversations lately, I know how busy you are, so I'm extremely grateful on behalf of everyone who attended, I hope, but definitely from Beyond and Shift. It was a really illuminating and enlightening conversation for me. Thank you to all of the participants. Glad that you joined, glad that you stuck with us. Thanks for the questions. In terms of next steps, if you want to join Beyond, absolutely visit the website. There will be more talks like this, but also much more practical training about how you do some of these things, like listening to your customers, how you turn that into useful design processes that you can capture useful data from, measure, adapt and improve. And we're also running some learning groups that you can work through some of these challenges with some like-minded peers and get coached along the way by a kind of design specialist. The learning groups are running now, and we'll run a new cohort in the new year, and they've been incredibly valuable, I think, for those who've been on them. So yeah, join Beyond to keep up with that. And we also do link to Catalyst and the National Lottery Fund. The Catalyst and the National Lottery are funding a sort of sector challenges program for financial wellbeing organizations. There is some funding available to work through some of these challenges in a way that is with your peers and that creates some collective solutions to some common challenges that the sector's having. So there's a challenge around prototyping and testing a pain-free way to support online universal credit claims. There's funding available to create secure documentation sharing for people accessing debt advice, which I think is which has come up today. There's a challenge on how you coordinate end-to-end advice to resolve debt issues, and there's a challenge on kind of how we can enable self-serve debt resolutions that are kind of well-designed, useful, and enable access to get people to the support that they need and cut through the noise. So in the follow-up email, you'll have links to those. There's about, I think, 60K split across different organizations and design partners to help work on those challenges. And the deadline's this Friday. So if you are interested, then give us a shout or just go straight to the website and apply. But thank you to the panelists. Thanks to everyone who attended. And enjoy the rest of the year. And I hope you all get a nice rest at Christmas.